It's like seeing, I'm just trying to put into context for the United Kingdom, it's like being at the scene of a terrorist atrocity, like the 7th of July bombings in London, or something like that, because you've just got, you know, burnt out vehicles wrapped around buildings, and um, uh, buildings have collapsed. Civilian buildings and residential infrastructure is totally destroyed in a way which you can see people have died there literally hours before you got there.
First of all, just explain. You're the lead prosecutor with this international mobile justice team. Just explain how your job works. You arrive in Ukraine. What happens? Talk us through it. How it works.
Yeah, so we're a team of experts, both lawyers and investigators, and lawyers who have investigated. We're backed by the United States, the European Union, and the UK government to bring our expertise to help support the Ukrainian authorities investigating the massive war crimes that are taking place around the country. And of course, prior to 2014, Ukraine didn't have any, I think, well, at least hardly any war crimes investigators or prosecutors. And since the war began in 2014 and the latest invasion in February, obviously they've gained more experience. But we actually just helped support the national and the regional authorities investigate some of these atrocities.
And what are the sites that you visited then?
Well, the way it works is the clues in the name, I guess. Mobile justice teams. We not only help advise with the most serious cases that the Ukrainian authorities have, like Mariupol, like Bucha, like Borodianka, and all the other sites that I guess some of your listeners may have heard of. We also go the very next day to some of the worst atrocities. So you may have heard of missile strikes on the shopping centre at Kremenchuk, which burnt out the entire shopping centre and killed 30. There were missile strikes also on residential buildings in Odessa. And do you remember the one in Vinnytsia, which killed the little girl pushing her toy pushchair? That killed 20 or 30 as well, and it just struck the very centre of a very calm middle class, if you like, Ukrainian city, right in the centre of it. So I turn up at the next day to help oversee the investigation.
And how challenging is it to investigate this? Because not least, this is still a war zone.
Yeah, hugely. First of all, it's not unheard of the day after a missile strike to have another missile strike in the same place as the authorities are clearing it up. That's happened in other countries before. To even get down to some of the places, bridges have been destroyed by missiles, so it takes a long time to get down there. Roads are taken out by bombing and shelling. And in the case of Izium, that was astonishing, actually, because that was like a 5-hour journey, which should have been really 2 hours in peacetime, just trying to avoid burnt out tanks and Russian military vehicles and like I say, damage to the infrastructure and the roads. So it's pretty astonishing, actually, even for some of the stuff that I've seen in my career prior to this.
And how difficult do you find it on a human level, personally, to be confronted with these atrocities?
Fortunately, it's not often I actually see directly dead bodies or corpses, but nevertheless, it's pretty distressing. What you're seeing is the remnants of death, effectively, the next day when you visit these sites. It's like seeing. I'm just trying to put into context for the United Kingdom. It's like being at the scene of a terrorist atrocity, like the 7th of July bombings in London, or something like that, because you've just got, burnt out vehicles wrapped around buildings, and buildings have collapsed. Civilian buildings and residential infrastructure is totally destroyed in a way which you can see people have died there literally hours before you got there. So it's, how do I cope on a personal level? Well, I'm trained as a lawyer to think objectively, and I guess my brain clicks in when I go down to visit these sites, but you can't help but take a deep breath and step back and just be astonished at what you're seeing. So I cope, but it does have an impact. When I return from Ukraine for a rest, I'm absolutely exhausted emotionally and physically. So I guess in answer to your question, I cope, but yeah, it's a heavy toll.
Mm. But you still want to go back?
No, absolutely. I think it's an important job that not just me, but all of us are doing who are active in Ukraine, supporting the Ukrainian authorities. And it's very important that those who are helping and those who wish to help continue to support Ukraine. It's a very important role. It's ever more crucial at this stage that Ukraine receives that support. And it's actually a pleasure and a privilege to do so from my own personal perspective. So yes, I'll go back and I'll enjoy doing so for that reason.
How challenging is it actually gathering evidence that can then be used potentially in any trial in the future?
Yes, it is. It is challenging. I don't have jurisdiction over there to actually collect the evidence. It's obviously the Ukrainian authorities' job. They have the legal jurisdiction to do so. But what we're trying to do is make sure that the way in which they collect it makes it as effective and as admissible as possible, not just in Ukrainian court, but of course there's a real possibility that that evidence will and could be used in an international court in the future. So it's really to make sure that it's collected in the most effective way possible, and that its integrity is maintained, so that it has powerful, cogent value in a court of law in the future, whether in Ukraine, but obviously also internationally. So what we try to do is ensure that the Ukrainian authorities act according to international standards.
And some people will say, what are the chances of actually a conviction? What are the chances of President Putin being hauled before the International Criminal Court, or generals and people calling the shots and making the orders? I guess you have to sort of separate yourself from that, do you? And just think, well, my job here is to get the evidence and hope that that will happen.
Yes, this is just the first stage. It's very much get your head down and build big cases and try to go as high as the top. We don't worry about whether someone will be arrested. We worry about building an effective case so that if somebody's arrested, we ensure that they're convicted on a strong case. But turning to the second part of that, the second question, which is what are the chances? It has happened before, obviously, with Yugoslav courts. The political leaders were eventually arrested and convicted, as were the military leaders. And I wouldn't lose hope on that. Obviously, it's a long shot for Putin. If he's still alive to be arrested at that stage, who knows what will happen in the future. But I think as regards other political and military leaders, why not?
It will be a long process, though, presumably. I mean, there's not just the gathering of the evidence, but there's then the building the case and actually getting to a criminal court. I mean, you mentioned Yugoslavia. It was many, many years after the end of the war, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think one thing that the history's taught us with international justice is you have to be patient. And I guess it's just part of the process. But one thing that international justice can improve on is that once a defendant has been arrested, or a suspect, it can get more efficient. It should be more efficient, and it should be quicker. And that's something we all have to improve on, I think, in the international world.
Do you have plans to go back to Ukraine soon?
Yes, I'll be going back next week.
And where are you going then?
Well, it varies. So obviously we're based in Kyiv, where, like I said, even if we're not going out to crime sites, we're advising on the most serious cases there that are ongoing. But I'd expect to be going back out to the east, to Kharkiv, or to wherever we're needed, really, where the most serious crime sites are uncovered or occur.
And do you speak to people who've witnessed what's happened? Is that part of it, or are you not involved in that element?
No, it's possible, but we try to stay out of that. If we're asked to assist, obviously, with taking evidence from a witness, then we'll do so in the proper way. But no, we stay away from that.